Hey folks, Happy New Year. Since starting the podcast in late 2018, I have met some great founders and heard heaps of wonderful startup tales. In today's episode, I've taken the stories of 3 hardworking Shopify app entrepreneurs and focused on how they got started. The Shopify App Store now has 8,000 apps as of January 2023, and it still represents a wonderful opportunity. So let's hear from 3 of the originals. Mike Potter is the CEO and co-founder of the Rewind Backup app. Jay Myers is the co-founder of Bold Apps, and Björn Forsberg is the owner of FORSBERG+two. So first up is Mike Potter. Mike Potter is the CEO and the co-founder of the Rewind app, which is now one of the most popular apps in the Shopify App Store. When I spoke to Mike back in October 2018, he had 20 employees. He now has over 100, and his success has been absolutely phenomenal. In this excerpt, you'll hear how Mike took one of the most boring topics within the tech SaaS space and turned it into a wonderful business and a wonderful success story. Not only does the Rewind app back up Shopify, but since the interview, Mike has also moved across to BigCommerce and QuickBooks and is planning on expanding the business across a range of software applications. So here goes.
I started Rewind with my business partner, James, about 3 years ago. I had run a previous startup about 5 to 6 years ago, ended up working with James, my business partner, for a bit at another company. And I just emailed him and I said, I really want to work with you again. Loved what we were doing. And let's see if we can do something. And so we started working on another product. Had nothing to do with Shopify, completely different. We worked on that for about 6 months, tried to give it a good go. Really wasn't working out. There was nobody that was installing it. We couldn't get anybody using it. So one day I went up to him and I said, what if we did backups? Now I'm a big backup guy. I don't know about you, but I've lost data, on my work computer. I've lost data at home. And I really, have made a promise to myself now that that's never going to happen. So, at home, I back up my backups. I've got 2 hard drives at home. Those are both mirrored into the cloud so that I don't lose any data. I've lost those important pictures, of kids. I've lost important data from my work computer. I was doing a presentation one time in Chicago. I used to be a technical evangelist at Adobe, and I was doing a presentation in Chicago in front of a few hundred people, and my boss and my hard drive crashed there, and I lost that whole entire hard drive. I've had those experiences, and I think if you've had those, the importance of a backup, and you really want to make sure that you never go through that again, right? Because it really is just a hopeless feeling that you get in the pit of your stomach when you go in and, your computer doesn't boot up, or your hard drive doesn't have all the files on it, or what have you.
Mike, it's interesting that you say that, because people that are listening would probably think that when we now live in the world of the cloud, that backup isn't required. But it's when you get into the detail of the app, obviously backup is required. When you said you contacted your business partner, what year was that? Was that long ago?
2015. 2015. We started this 3 years ago.
Okay.
Your reaction is the same as James's was, right? When I told him, I said, I think we should do backups for Shopify. He said, why would you do that? It's in the cloud. It's all backed up. That's definitely the assumption that most store owners have. Yeah, it's funny because, since you visited us during the year, we put your app in any store that we build as a kind of a default. Initially, when we talk to the client, they kind of don't understand why it's required. And then eventually, after a very short 2-minute conversation, they understand why it is absolutely required. So that's it's the opposite to the way the majority of people would think. I suppose the perception is not the reality. So at that time then, did you sit down, I know you told me before you had experience, or you knew of Shopify. Obviously Shopify started in Ottawa, and could you just explain I know how you ended up choosing Shopify, but just explain the link there with Toby and the Ottawa base. You guys are pretty much, close to each other. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're in Ottawa and they're in Ottawa. And, to be honest with you, when we first started it, we really just wanted to work for them. The company was growing amazingly well. It's been, the darling of the Ottawa tech scene for probably the last decade, at least, I would say. And so, even 3 years ago, even 5 years ago, I was trying to figure out how do you get in there. And so, 3 years ago, I said, why don't we just do Shopify? We can build this product and, maybe we'll build a cool app and they'll hire us. We can get a job there. I've always said that the best way to get a job at a company is to make it, right? Build it on your own and build something that company needs, and then make your job, make it happen. And so that was sort of the original intent. We built the entire application to really mimic their technology stack as much as we knew. And so, when they came in, we would have been able to say, okay, it's built on the same technologies that you guys are using internally. We're familiar with your APIs, and we'd love to work with you. And turns out that rather than do that, we've built a pretty successful app with, tens of thousands of people who've installed it now, and growing very, very well. We're just past 15 people, and we'll be 20 people by the end of the year. So we're growing nicely, and we're saving stores, and we're helping people recover their data, which is really honestly the most important thing in my mind.
Fantastic. And I think when we met, which was 4 or 5 months ago, I think you were up to 10 people. And I remember you telling me that you were going home to confirm some more hires. That's a great story. Jay Myers is the co-founder of one of the most popular app developers in the Shopify ecosystem. In fact, Jay Myers was one of the first app developers to even have an app in the ecosystem. His first app, the Upsell app, actually took down Shopify's API at one point, and Jay tells the story very humorously. He's a really, really nice guy and a wonderful, wonderful gentleman to learn from. In the episode, I remember I was recording from a bedroom of a hotel, talking into my laptop, very, very nervous to talk to the most popular Shopify app developer. And Jay, as I said, is an absolute gent. So here goes.
So I was a merchant, and I probably right around the same time as you. I think I heard about Shopify in 2000. It was like late 2009. And I had been running online stores since 1998 was the first store I launched. When I built that store in 98, it didn't even have a shopping cart. It had products and a phone number to call. It was, I built it with Microsoft Front Page.
I was there.
Yeah. So, and then went through, fast forward, I guess almost 12 years later, I went through various platforms, was big on eBay for a few years. Like in the early 2000s, eBay was like what Amazon is now. Like everyone was selling on eBay. And then after a while, you realize you're really just renting customers. You're not building a brand or a business, and it makes good money. But anyway, so I started building sites. In 2009, I just heard about Shopify actually from an email from MailChimp, which coincidentally now they don't work together anymore. But so I got an email from MailChimp saying, "Hey, big news! We now have a Shopify app." Oh, what's Shopify? Clicks on the link. So I moved over one of my stores, and I think I was like store number 8,000 or something. So I was actually pretty early on as a merchant. And then one of the things I just loved being a merchant, at that time, I think Shopify was one of the first platforms that had the concept of an app store. It's fairly common now, like a lot of e-commerce platforms have some type of an app store or a marketplace, but that was new. And when I saw that, I was just like a kid in a candy shop. Like every day I would go in, and at the time there was only 40 apps. So there was one new app a week. Now there's multiple new ones a day, but I would go in every couple days and see if there was any new app, and I would install every single app. And then of course I had 100 ideas of apps I wanted, because back then there was very, very little. So I was one day at a pub with one of my best friends, and I was like, "Hey, I think I want to build a Shopify app." And he actually helped run an e-commerce agency, and he's like, "What?" He had never heard of Shopify. So I kind of told him about Shopify, and he just said, "Hey, I know these two really good developers. Why don't we just build it and see if we can make a little beer money on the side?" It was kind of an experiment. And I thought, well, great, perfect, because then I can use the app on my store too. So we did that. We thought to ourselves, well, what's the easiest app we can build? The first app I really wanted was a product comparison app. So you pick multiple products and you click compare, and it stacks them up side by side, and you can compare features and specs. But we decided that one was a bit too hard. So we were like, well, let's just build an upsell app. That's a piece of cake. So it turns out here we are 7 days later, we're actually still adding features to that and building on that original upsell app. But we just, the basic original concept was you add something to the cart and a pop-up comes up and you're buying a leather jacket, and it's like, "Hey, would you like the leather treatment kit?" And it was a super simple thing to us in our heads. But what we didn't realize at the time was it was it was kind of revolutionary on Shopify because it was the first time when we launched it, it actually took down Shopify. So like some store ran a sale. It was the Chive. This doesn't happen anymore. This was a long time ago, but like they would run a sale. And because of the amount of times that the app was popping up and the API calls were on the front end of the store and there was no API throttling or anything back then. So like Shopify went down.
So they maxed out capacity as a result of the success of the app.
Yeah, because the way the API was originally designed was not to be used on the front end of a store. The API was originally designed for integration apps. And that's what most of the apps were back then. They were like, integrate with MailChimp, integrate with UPS, integrate with QuickBooks, integrate with something. And they would do back-end batch jobs. So like at night, it would sync your orders. But an app that lived on the front end of the store that did calls based off of like traffic. So if there was 1 million people on the front end of a store all adding something to the cart, it would take it down. So at first they weren't super crazy about the app. They're like, well, this is not really using the API the way we intended. But then merchants loved it and were raving about it. And it was like, it became the number one app like right away. And then Shopify figured out a way to make it work. They said, okay, well, we're going to have API throttling, and they just implemented a few things to make it work. And we kind of saw it, the potential of it early on. So right away, we kind of said, okay, well, what's the next app we're going to build? And so then we built product discount, and then we built store locator, and then options, and then quantity breaks, and then one by one. And then, yeah, like we were in my basement. First employees I had an unfinished basement, so it kind of worked out perfect. We just set up desks down there. And
Björn Forsberg owns FORSBERG+two, and he also runs one of the most popular Shopify app houses in the Shopify community. He has over 85,000 customers, and he runs the popular apps like Orderly Emails and Orderly Print. The interesting thing about Björn is that his business was a one-man show up to a couple of years ago, and he previously worked in the finance area, and he decided that he wanted something different. So here goes. I found Shopify in terms of the capability to build a business in terms of an agency around it. But what you did was you actually saw the opportunity to actually build a developer agency around it. And you couldn't code. So 2 questions for you. How did you find Shopify, and how did you go from your 9 to 5 in a bank to developing some of the most popular apps in the Shopify ecosystem?
Yeah. Oh, what a nice way to put it. But so we just had our first child, and I had paternity leave from my banking job. And it was an investment bank where they build sort of online trading systems. So it was a very technology-focused company. And I started out in customer services, moved into sort of managerial role, and then finally moved over to project management. So I was getting closer and closer to the IT part of the business. And, part of my job was to sort of translate the business goals. We need this functionality, and then translating that into something that IT could build. I was getting into the process of building software without actually building it myself. And how I found Shopify, I was actually looking to start an online store. So we just had our daughter, and we thought, oh, wow, I'd like to have a little side project, and I'll sell something. And obviously, when you've just had a child, you're always thinking about, what do they need? So we're going to get into like organic baby clothes or these engraved dummies that you can get with their names on them or whatever. So I was just researching that, and I came across Shopify. And as I was reading through it, part of the trouble was we lived in a tiny apartment. It was like 59 square meters or something. The thought of having a warehouse didn't really fit well with our living situation. And then also, the amount of capital that you put out before you can sell something. Anyway, I noticed while I was researching Shopify that they had this app store, and that you could basically build an app and have them market it in their app store, and then you could get customers that way. And at the time, it was, almost 10 years ago now. And there was a forum post there with a list of things that merchants were looking to have apps for, or that Shopify itself couldn't do yet. So they're looking for somebody. So I went down that list and sort of went, maybe I could build one of these, and sort of took it from there.
So was that a public forum?
Yeah, it was I guess it's called communities.shopify.com. I think it's been renamed. I'm not sure exactly what it's called anymore. But it was just a forum post that was pinned to the top of the app section. So it was quite amazing that you could just sort of, look down this list. And obviously I wanted to pick something that wasn't huge. So I I saw that somebody was looking for an invoicing solution where you could select multiple orders and then have them print off. Shopify had a free app that would let you do one order at a time, but I thought, hey, it'll save people time by being able to do multiple orders at once. And that's kind of where the idea for Orderly Print came along.
Now, you're talking about 2011. Was drop shipping popular at that time? Because that could have been another option if you want to go down the store route.
Yeah, I think it was, at least on my radar, it hadn't come on yet. So maybe it was just in its infancy, but I think that was a couple of years later.
Yeah. So you're working in the bank, and I've been around those kind of roles before. So in actual fact, what you were doing was you were learning how to develop and how the processes worked, how the systems worked, even though, as you say, you weren't hard coding. So did it twig with you that you had some sort of a competency, or that you were attracted to it and that you could probably do it?
Definitely. And I think the hard part was finding something that was small enough that I felt this could actually be an app that people will pay for. And at the same time, not too much for me to both have somebody else build for me with the budget that I had, and then feeling like, hey, I can actually understand this space enough without being a domain expert, I guess you could say. So yeah, that was kind of my criteria. And then I had $2,000 to spend, and went and found a company online that specialized in small apps, and had them build the first version. So my biggest job there at the start was really, designing all the screens and sort of explaining, if somebody clicks this button, what should happen? What should they see exactly on the screen? So it was extremely detailed document, but that also means that you can give it to somebody else that then they can understand exactly what should happen when they're building it.
So effectively, you were building a requirements doc similar to what you would have been involved in anyway within the bank, and you were giving that to somebody else.
That was exactly what I was doing. Yeah. So I just took my template from work and did a similar thing for myself. And I maybe did it even more detailed because it was my own money.
Indeed. You mentioned $2,000. That wouldn't get you very much now, Björn.
No, I don't think so.
No.
I think, their idea was also just created a little MVP for me. And then, of course, as money started coming in and I needed more features, I'd come back to them and say, hey, can you also build this? So, I guess that was like V0.1. And then as more, I started getting customers on the app, then I'd reinvest that money into the app again.
So when did it launch? The first app, was it 2012?
Yeah, beginning of 2012. I think it was February.
And at what stage in that process did you start to teach yourself how to code?
That was, I'd say a couple of years later. Yeah. So first I was just doing customer support during the nights. So I had this app, and then, if something didn't work like it should, I'd note it down and then send it off to the developers to have it fixed. So I was sort of a middleman, I guess you could say. It was my app, of course, but somebody else was building it. And to begin with, you get a couple of customers, then you get a couple more, and it slowly sort of snowballs, right? And I'd save up money and then ask for new features and send off that money. And eventually I got tired of sending them all my money. So I started, making small fixes myself, reading books. And it was much easier because I understood what the app does. So I just had to read through the code to see how it does it, right? And then that's how I sort of taught myself.
That's a good reason to teach yourself how to code, Björn. You just said you were giving them all your money.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of a necessity, At that time, that was a couple of years later, and I was using my evenings with young kids and everything else to sort of focus on this. So I figured I might as well start getting something for this work. I was working for free for a couple of years, I guess.
Yeah, we all did that, Björn.
Yeah, no, it was my apprenticeship, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard a very good line one time. The best form of VC capital is your salary.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah. Do the side hustle and work full time. So 2011, 2012. So at what point did you go full time then?
That was in 2015. So I launched a second app about 6 months before, Order Printer Templates. And that was sort of taking off quite well and starting to generate pretty serious sort of income. At least I was basically matching my full-time salary on these side businesses. And I thought, if I can, get it this far with a couple of hours at night, then what can I do if I actually go full-time on this? So I waited until, I was getting a similar amount of money from both my app business to my actual salary, and then just transitioned over.
Yeah, it's funny. The way you describe it is actually textbook. Like, information is readily available now, and the startup culture is just everywhere, and VCs are everywhere, and you're describing it very eloquently. But I think the bit that maybe we're not hearing is that it was tough work, wasn't it? And long hours.
Oh, absolutely. It was late nights and stressful times as well when, in the Shopify app business, you sort of live off reviews. So you're always trying to do the absolute best you can and give people good service and everything else. But at the same time, you're sort of always worried about, one or two people getting a bad experience and leaving a bad review, and that can have a huge outcome. So it's kind of a stressful journey, I guess you could say. Shopify app business has grown since then, and the market for apps has grown hugely since then. And I think VCs and private equity have really gotten their eyes open for Shopify. So, starting an app on Shopify now is maybe easier to get capitalized than it was when I did it. But I guess I've always been this sort of bootstrapper that wants to go at myself, see where I go.
Thanks for listening. All of our episodes are available on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. A special note of appreciation goes to our sponsors, Rewind.io, the leading backup solution for Shopify store owners. Get your first month of Rewind for free by simply responding to any welcome email once you sign up for your free trial on Rewind.io. If you're a Shopify user with an exciting story to tell, reach out to the team on podcast@milkbottlelabs.com. Until the next time, take care.